podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and very excited to be joined again today by my team. We have our wonderful Assembly Fellow, Sara Marshall, and our legislative assistants, Enrique, Govea. Welcome back to the program, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. It's fun. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit different show. So this is their final show before the legislature breaks for summer recess. And so this, for everyone out there, the podcast will be going on a break for about a month while we attend our 4th of July festivities and spend a little more time with our family before we come back in August and for end of session. So we thought we'd do it a little bit differently today. So I'm going to get into some stories of the week, but then we're going to do some AMA, some Ask Me Anything. So we did put out a call to constituents to send in their questions, and we'll be going over a few of those on the podcast today. So thanks for joining me for that.
Absolutely.
And this is actually your guys' idea. So this is
It was. Yeah, no, I remember pitching it, and it's exciting that it came to happen.
Yeah. But before we get to that, what are you guys up to? Like, what's been going on? How's your experience been in 2024 as really both kind of in new positions, right? Like, so you're a new legislative assistant this year and you're a new fellow this year. So what's kind of been how have you guys been doing this year? We'll start with Enrique.
No, for sure. I appreciate the question. And well, because I was a fellow last year in the same position as Sara is now in our office, this is my second year in the legislature, so it's been an opportunity to sort of reemploy what I learned in my first year. There's still a lot to see and learn, and they do tell you that every day or one day to another is not the same.
Yeah.
So everything does or can change really rapidly, but really excited to just try different things and reemploy those strategies that worked out.
Yeah, I keep you pretty busy too, so there's never a shortage of work.
Here for it.
But it's fun.
It's fun. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love it.
Yeah. Similar to what Enrique said, I feel like when I try to explain to people what I do, it's really hard because we follow this cycle.
Yeah.
And so it feels like every week there's something new.
Yeah.
So as someone who's new to the building, you're learning something new. I want to say every day, if not at least every week and every month, because you're hitting all these deadlines and dealing with new people and new consultants. So it makes it really exciting. But just kind of, getting acclimated to all of the cycles and ups and downs of working in the legislature.
It is a tremendous amount of new people that you have to meet, though.
Yeah.
It's like you don't really realize until you start working down here, like how many people actually work in the policy arena.
Totally.
Because there's 30, 40 different issue areas.
No, absolutely.
And there's networks of people attached to each one of them. And some of them you won't ever work with until, randomly there's a bill on that topic or something, And
somebody,
really interesting.
the legislative director who trained me during my fellowship for Assemblyman when I worked for Assemblyman Joe Patterson, said that as staffers, you're sort of a mile wide, but an inch deep as far as how deep you can go into these issues. So it's sort of just time management. And sometimes you want to read or dive into all the different issue areas, but you have to prioritize.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's not really a room in the day or in our brains to be an expert on every issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always amazed by people such as yourself and then Teresa in our office, who's our current Capitol Director. I mean, random names will pop up and you guys will go, oh, yeah, we know that person. They do this and they do that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have names like spilling out of my brain at all times trying to remember everybody.
That too is just like being here forever.
Yeah.
Totally.
It comes with time.
It's like, it happens eventually. You'll kind of have that same probably.
Yeah.
But no, it's good. So, and what are you guys have any summer plans? Like any fun things you're doing while I'm gone? So that you're actually like have a little break?
For me, just survive the heat, maybe do a leg day or a few leg days with some friends, but just trying to spend as much time outdoors as I can.
Yeah. Oh,
I love the outdoors.
All right. I'm glad. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I am famously indoorsy.
Yes,
So,
yes. So I've
see,
heard.
my opinion on beating the heat is you don't go outdoors.
Don't go outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
The heat
Or
can't
just
hurt
hang
you
in the
there.
shade.
The heat can't
That's
hurt
fair.
you.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
I am in the thick of wedding planning.
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah. So that's your summer.
that is all of my free time.
Okay.
So I feel like my mom is calling me to and from work every day, figuring out like what we talked about last night, we're going to talk about tonight to get everything done. So
that'll take a lot of your time this month, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice to have like a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
Because it's surprising how much you can do a lot online, especially these days. But sometimes it's really just you have to get in and do appointments and fittings and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So
that sounds. I mean, that's busy, but it's fun.
It's busy, but it's fun busy.
Yeah. So that's good. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
I am, and then I think we're all going to the Folsom Pro Rodeo this week. So that is also, that should be a good time.
Something to look forward to.
So that'll be a good way to kick off. The
summer. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited.
That will be a great way to kick off the summer.
I'm actually mad because I'm gonna have to miss a day that I was gonna take my kids, and we'll get into why in a moment. That's a little tease. But let's real quickly let's talk about the stories of the week. I don't want to spend too much time here. I want to get to the questions. But my gosh, like so much went on in the last week. It's been pretty hard. So I don't, we won't dive too deep. The governor had his state of the state, I guess, almost a week ago now, which now feels like a lifetime ago, based on all the stories that have happened since. So I was gonna play that, but I think we're just gonna dive into some of the things that happened last week. So I will say it was a surprising week. There was a lot of good news last week. And this is something that I feel like I don't get to say on this podcast very often. There were 3 like major good news, like policies or decisions that happened last week, or bills that died. And all of them in some way affect the business community, small businesses, but really, have, I think, broad effects across the board as well. So number one, the bill to allow unemployment insurance benefits to go to striking workers, which was very controversial proposal that had been put forward. Actually, I believe got vetoed by the governor last year, was put forward again this year, was killed in committee, which almost never happens. So it actually was voted down. It did not receive enough votes to advance. And so from a small business standpoint, this is huge news because this legislation was going to put a lot of pressure on essentially our unemployment insurance system, which is already tens of billions of dollars in debt. That debt has to be paid back over the next, until it's paid off, but probably over the next decade by small businesses in the form of a higher payroll tax. So what happened is during the pandemic, we took out a number of loans from the federal government to prop up our unemployment insurance system because we ran out of money essentially, and we are one of only 2 states that still has debt owed to the federal government. Well, when you owe this debt to the federal government, they actually increase the taxes on every employer in your state per employee. So it's a per employee tax until that debt is paid off. So the last time this happened was during the Great Recession in like 2009, 2010. It took businesses 10 years to pay that debt off. And then we've just, as soon as it gets paid off, we do it again with the pandemic. So it's really frustrating. And I know that if you're a business owner, you're going to start to see this annually on your, on your taxes, is you're going to see this cost continue to tick up, and it goes up every single year until the debt is paid off. So it's like an exponential increase. So it is, I was really, really not happy with this legislation that would have expanded unemployment insurance benefits, largely because it's gonna, put more pressure on this debt that small business owners have to pay. So.
I feel as though because of the pandemic, small businesses already had their own issues or challenges that they were facing. So this is just another, just unfortunate occurrence.
Yeah, no, it was definitely bad timing for sure.
Yeah.
On with more good news, though, so that bill died. So that was the good news on that one.
Sure.
That bill is voted down.
Yeah.
We also passed PAGA reform, the Private Attorneys General Act, the biggest reforms to PAGA that we have seen ever. But, since the law went into place. And so, this was something that our podcast last week was completely dedicated to. So just to report back, the legislature did pass that. And so very, very thankful for the relief that that's going to provide to small businesses. Won't dive too much into PAGA because if you want to learn more about the actual legislation and all of that, I would suggest go back to last week's episode 41.
Yeah, definitely.
Where we had Ashley Hoffman on from the California Chamber of Commerce, and we broke down this entire situation. So definitely go back and take a listen on that, but it is going to provide significant relief to businesses. Did you guys listen to that one? I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm finishing it through, but I do also recommend. I think it's really productive and
it was just
really
great because
informative
she Ashley is like an attorney that has actually litigated this stuff, and so she was able to break down why it's so impactful for California businesses.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a good lesson.
And it's awesome to be helping educate constituents and the people in that way, because very few people maybe are knowledgeable on the topic or understand how it could trickle down and affect them.
Yeah.
So it's great to have experts on like that who can speak to it. And
Well, that's why I loved having Ashley on, because it was it's a very complex policy area. And
sure is.
If you're not a lawyer, which I am not, it is actually
Me neither.
a little hard to understand. So I really appreciated her coming on last week.
Absolutely.
So go check that one out. Last week, episode 41, all about PAGA. And then the last bit of good news, at least in my mind, I know there's different opinions on this, but the United States Supreme Court, they released a lot of rulings, and this isn't really a Supreme Court podcast, so we're not going to dive into all of them, but I'm sure there's a lot of news out there on a lot of the decisions they released. But the big one, I think, that impacts California is their decision on the Grants Pass case, 6-3 ruling. They essentially ruled that local governments can, in fact, enforce camping laws. For many years, we have been under this Boise versus Martin decision, which essentially said that cities cannot stop encampments from happening in your public spaces, your parks, unless you have housing available in those same communities to meet the needs, the housing needs. This really hamstrung localities across the nation when they were simply trying to enforce camping bans that, by the way, apply to every person, not just those experiencing homelessness, but to every person across the board, not allowing camping in public spaces and public parks. This, in my mind, this decision by the Supreme Court restores sanity on this issue, empowers local governments to actually enforce the laws that they have on their books.
Right.
And is going to be a game changer when it comes to addressing homelessness in California.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot that we need to do when it comes to mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment and housing, for that matter. But at the end of the day, we also have to make sure that our parks and our public spaces remain clean, remain safe. This is a public health and safety crisis as well as a housing crisis. And
of course,
I think this ruling really underscores that and will empower local governments to take action. The city of Folsom has already come out and said we are immediately, essentially resuming our policies of not allowing camping in our public spaces.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see some pretty drastic improvements over the next year. So
absolutely. Well, to your point, there's different issues involved with it, but I think removing the tools that our localities have to enforce the law and keep their communities clean is probably not the direction that.
Yeah, it was always frustrating. The Boise versus Martin ruling was always frustrating to me because, while all these communities are doing a lot and spending a lot to address, housing and mental health, substance abuse, to not allow those same communities to then, make sure that their public spaces are safe.
Right.
I mean, we're talking like, in the park where my kids play, right? Like we found needles on the ground, right? I mean, these are the type of actually in Rancho Cordova, a good example as well. In 2022, I believe it was, we had 3 different constituents that were killed by homeless individuals that really did need to be in treatment. They needed to be, obviously getting the care that they needed. But those are the tragedies that are happening in our communities, in my community, that we need to make sure that we're avoiding.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you have to allow cities to address those head on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think about the innovation that can happen when we give our districts and cities and counties, et cetera, discretion to work within the framework that they decide to. Because one of the things that can happen when we have this heavy-handed blanket policy is that everybody's sort of subscribing to the same prescription, and it doesn't leave space for innovation. Maybe some city is going to come up with a really productive, helpful, policy solution that does address the mental health and the public safety and all these various components. And they wouldn't have been able to otherwise because they didn't have the discretion, and the freedom to do so.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And when you look at it too, the interesting about this ruling is it truly does restore local control from the standpoint that localities across California are going to be able to take different approaches on this, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So interestingly, I mentioned the city of Folsom came out and like the police chief immediately said, we're going to start enforcing our laws because after, given this decision, which was the way I was hoping that things would go in our district. But then you saw the city of Los Angeles. I saw a supervisor in the city of Los Angeles come out and basically say, this changes nothing for us. Like we are not going to essentially, clear encampments, which I, again, from my perspective, is the complete wrong policy approach. But they have the flexibility and the freedom to take that approach. And, laboratories of democracy. Let's see if it works for them in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
I can tell you what I think is probably going to happen in Los Angeles. I think you're going to see, especially after this ruling, you're going to see more people gravitate to the communities that are not enforcing these laws.
Yeah.
And so my guess is you will see increases in the homeless population in areas that choose not to enforce camping laws. And then you're going to see decreases in communities that do. And that is going to be kind of a restructuring of this. But again, like that is the beauty of this decision is it actually allows, to your point, every city and every locality to actually make the decision that works best for their community.
Absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth in that just like the states and the country are laboratories of the democracy, I think the same applies for the localities in California. And then soon enough, we will see people voting with their feet.
For sure.
If you just allow them to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good transition. Are we going to let people vote? That's a good transition, Enrique. To some of the bad news. Look, so I'm sitting last night playing Monopoly with my youngest son, Austin, at the dinner table last night. And I get a call 7:18 p.m. By the way, we're recording this on a Monday. It won't release till Wednesday. So that's actually going to be an important fact to know because there's going to be a lot that happens in the next 3 days.
Yeah.
But it was Sunday night last night, 7:18 p.m. The supermajority in the legislature dropped their language. They introduced a bill to essentially put a competing ballot measure on the ballot in November that is going to compete with the Proposition 47 reform initiative. Yeah. So this was, something that had been rumored for the last couple of weeks, something that we had not seen details about or heard about, but ended up going on CBS 13 last night at around 8:15 to kind of talk a little bit about my reaction to this. But essentially, this is going to be the story of this coming week. I mean, when this podcast releases on Wednesday, we will have not had a chance to vote on it yet. I think we're voting on it Wednesday night. But over the next few days, this is going to be probably the dominant story in the state capitol. And so I don't know. Did you guys hear about this yesterday at all? I don't know. You're probably just comfortable and not worrying about this. I was like, my wife was like, I was just stressing out about this. So
Yeah.
it was not a super fun way to end a weekend. But yeah, I don't know if you had heard since.
Well, I'm kind of no, I'm catching up with those news since as of this morning.
Like a
Really, I'm kind
Sunday
of
night.
wrapping
Come
my
on, like
Yeah.
really?
head around
Like,
it.
I mean, I
Really,
know why
but
they did it on a Sunday night because it has to be in print for 72 hours,
mhm.
and we're leaving on Wednesday,
Yeah.
so for break.
Yeah.
So this has to be voted on Wednesday. So if they didn't put it in last night, it wasn't going to happen
Right.
before the break.
Right.
So I think that's why they did it, but it's still frustrating they waited to the last minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there were to your point, like rumors around as it pertains to Prop 47 reforms. So though I still sort of trying to wrap my head around it, it's not super surprising, I guess.
So
Right.
this, yeah. So just to dive in a little bit on what this bill will actually do. So it's interesting. So it's essentially an inferior alternative to the Proposition Reform Initiative. The Reform Initiative, the citizen. I'll just to make it clear, I'll refer to the existing Reform Initiative that's currently qualified for the ballot as the Citizens Initiative.
Right.
And then we'll refer to this one as the Legislature's Initiative,
Yeah.
just to kind of make it clear.
And the citizens, I am familiar.
It's kind of confusing, but the Citizens Initiative essentially, takes a lot of strong steps in holding fentanyl dealers accountable, a lot of strong steps in holding retail theft, those who commit retail theft crimes accountable, allowing for felonies to be charged after a certain number of offenses, allowing for aggregation of those crimes over a period, with no limit on the period of years, but essentially saying if you steal from this store and this store and this store, you actually can now aggregate those together and charge a higher penalty versus the way it works today, which is you can steal from this store and this store and this store, and they're all separate crimes. And if they're under $950 in each store, then you only get 3 misdemeanors versus a higher felony penalty.
Right.
This is, in my opinion, this was all started by Proposition 47 from about 10 years ago that I think desperately needs to be reformed. But the legislature has put forward this countermeasure. One of the parts of it is they do have some language in there about fentanyl dealers and essentially increasing penalties on fentanyl dealers. So you think, oh, cool. So that's nice. That's a lot like the Citizens Initiative, right? Well, no, actually, they put a little sentence in there that says you can have higher penalties for these fentanyl dealers if they knowingly sold this drug knowing there was fentanyl within the product. So what we're seeing in a lot of these bills, the fentanyl bills that went through the legislature this year, they actually killed one of my bills this way, is they amended it to say you have to know that there was fentanyl in the drugs before you sold them. Now, this is a huge loophole because it simply would allow the perpetrator to say, well, I didn't know there's fentanyl in there.
Exactly.
I mean, and you can't prove that I did know or didn't know, right?
Exactly.
So they will simply say they didn't know there was fentanyl in those. We thought we were selling, and this is particularly problematic with fentanyl because when you're selling cocaine, you know that it's cocaine, right? Like, I mean, it's obvious it's cocaine. But when you're selling fentanyl, oftentimes it is posing as something else, right? So you're selling something that, is being branded as something else, but it's laced with fentanyl.
Right.
So it's so easy for a criminal to say, well, I didn't know there's fentanyl in there. I thought they were this prescription drug or whatever, whatever it was at the time. And you can simply say, now, if you talk to maybe not any district attorney, but the vast majority of district attorneys in California will tell you that makes it substantially harder to bring a case against someone when you have a loophole like that. And so, I think that the fentanyl parts of this legislative version are completely useless. It also, the Citizens Initiative has a number of gun enhancements. So if you commit crimes such as selling fentanyl, while you possess a gun, you actually would get a higher penalty. There's an enhancement for possessing the gun during the commission of that crime. The legislature's version takes out all of the gun enhancements. So as much as the supermajority talks about, addressing gun violence in California, they are not willing to charge higher penalties for people that commit crimes with guns. I think that is extremely hypocritical.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the legislature's version caps essentially the aggregation to 3 years. So that is actually a difference from the citizens measure, but it's not a substantial difference, but it is still in the law that you'd have a 3-year window. So essentially you can commit a crime and then wait 3 years and commit another one, and it doesn't aggregate. And just going down a few others here. And then, the big piece of the legislature's version is that at the very bottom of it, it says that this is going to be going on the ballot in November as a special election. So that the deadline has passed to put it on the ballot, the regular ballot. So this would make it a special election at the top of the ballot, and they're consolidating it with the general election. So this measure will now be the first one the voters see on their ballot. And then the citizens initiative will get buried somewhere at the bottom.
It's very interesting how that
works. The levels of, I think that they're going to here to kind of hide and confuse and, mislead voters is pretty incredible. It's pretty unlike anything I've seen in this place. And so it's and it's all to pass a substantially watered down and mostly useless version to say that they did something to address retail theft and fentanyl in California, when in reality, this is, I think, going to do very little.
Just don't do very much. And I mean, just to that loophole of, whether the criminal knows whether there's fentanyl in there. Like, what criminal wouldn't say that they didn't know? There was fentanyl in it. Like, who's gonna say like, I actually?
I mean, because there's very few cases. I mean, I guess you could be selling, pure fentanyl. In that case, it'd be hard to say I didn't know there was fentanyl.
Right.
But in the vast majority of cases, you're selling
exactly
something that is not being sold as fentanyl. Right? It just has fentanyl.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder, like, if they have to go to such lengths to manipulate voters, maybe they should question some of the policies that they're trying to.
Yeah. I think that's that's a good way to look at it. I mean, you have a citizen, initiative that qualified with over 600,000 signatures from California voters, right? I mean, and you're undermining that to put your own version on the ballot literally in the last moment you possibly can. And I think it's important. So real quickly on that, I don't think I closed that loop on that. At the end of that bill, not only does it make it a special election, but it also says that it nullifies any similar measure if it gets more votes. So basically, whichever proposal gets more votes, the one with fewer votes is going to be nullified and void. So if the legislature version, which they're trying to stack the deck by putting it at the top, and it's gonna, I'm sure, get a very lovely ballot title and summary from the partisan attorney general. So that's all going to be, kind of the deck will be a little stacked on that, and they're gonna, and so if that one gets more votes than the citizens measure, then the citizens measure becomes null and void. Now there is still a world, even though the deck is stacked, where the citizens measure could win. But and in that case, I believe the legislature's version would be null and void. But it's pretty transparent what's going on here. They're doing everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. That's
it seems like it's being suppressed quite a bit,
Yeah.
But it's so funny because for months we heard, and you guys heard this, we heard we don't like the the supermajority and the governor were saying we don't like the initiative, the citizens initiative. We don't think this needs to go to voters. We just don't think it needs to go to voters. We think we can fix this in the legislature without going to voters. And they said that for months and months and months. And then at the last moment, they say they're trying to pass something that's going to go to voters. And and then what was it last week? This effort died, thankfully, but we've been talking about on this podcast where before they tried this competing initiative, they tried to actually kill the bills by putting the poison pill amendments into their own retail theft bills that basically said if the Citizens Initiative passes, then all these organized retail theft bills are going to die. So you're actually hurting public safety. I mean, all of the games, I mean, it's been one game after another. And then this is kind of like they're just Hail Mary.
Exactly.
So it's that is going to be the topic of discussion this week when this podcast releases on Wednesday morning. So you're probably listening, on Wednesday or even later, obviously, but the vote on this bill is going to be on Wednesday night. So keep an eye out for that. And
yeah, definitely.
I have the bill number here. I'm looking at KCRA's coverage on this. They put out a great story last night. I love it when like news stories like don't have the bill number.
That's what I always say when I put these agendas together too. And
come on.
You would think that it's maybe in like the first or second paragraph.
I was reading the bill last night, so I know there's a bill number. So there's the bill number is SB 1381. So that is going to be the what is going to be voted on Wednesday night. Again, went into print at 7:18 p.m. on Sunday night. It needs to be in print 72 hours per the Constitution before it can be voted on in its final form. So that would make it 7:19 maybe on Wednesday night when I'm supposed to take my kids to the rodeo. So that's awesome. So thank you for that, supermajority and governor.
In a way, there will be another rodeo in the legislature.
Exactly, right? Yeah,
I know.
Exactly.
Man.
So that's kind of the plan for this week. That's what we're going to be debating on Wednesday night. Another big aspect of this is that the amendments they were trying to do on these retail theft bills a week ago, those had an urgency clause which required a 2/3 vote of the legislature in each house. This bill is somehow being done by majority vote. So they've reduced the voting threshold. We're still diving into the reasons. There's provisions on special elections that allow it to be a majority vote. So because they're calling for a special election, they can do a majority vote. I believe it's also a budget trailer bill, so that's also another way you're able to get something enacted immediately without a 2/3 vote. And so there's, again, just kind of more loopholes here that they're trying to exploit. So that is the plan for Wednesday night. So tune in if you really want to see what goes down there. But we are currently, working on kind of a response and really diving into the bill to see, to learn more about it. But
we'll all be tuning in.
More to come on that. Cancel your Wednesday plan. No, I'm kidding.
Bring a sleeping bag.
Yeah, exactly. Bring a sleeping bag. I don't know.
Yeah, bring a sleeping bag, snacks.
We do have a couch.
Have to have snacks.
That's true. Yeah. But you gotta like flip a coin for it though.
We do.
There's only one.
It's only one
we can
couch.
take turns. We can have like
just have shifts.
Yeah. Who gets to lay on the couch?
Exactly. All right. So I think that's a good time to now transition to our AMA, Ask Me Anything segment of the program. This is the first time we've ever done this.
Yeah.
So I appreciated the idea. I think it's a good,
absolutely,
a good idea. So we've got a few good questions from constituents. I will say off the top, we can't get to every question. We received a lot of questions.
Yeah, we did.
Which I was, really appreciated. But we'll see how many that we can get through. So you guys are now grilling me.
Yes.
So ask away.
We'll start off easy.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll start off here. So we did have constituents submit a few. So we're gonna start with a few kind of more get to know you type of type of vibe.
Yeah.
So the first is, how did you first get an interest to get into politics and or public policy? Like, how'd you get the itch or the interest?
It's funny. I just from a really young age, I just was really interested in government, like, government classes, right?
Yeah.
Not so, I mean, the politics, yes, but more so the policy and the kind of just how government works, political philosophy. Like, I was just really into that sort of stuff. My dad was a business major in college. Fresno State Bulldogs. I'm a Valley kid originally. So
Go Bulldogs.
And he really wanted me to go into to business.
Did
I'm
he?
like, nah, Dad, I really want to study political science. Like, you can't get a job in political science, which, in some ways he's probably right.
Yeah.
But we figured it out.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So he really wanted it. I remember pretty vividly, like he made me do this like personality quiz or whatever when I was a kid, like when I was a teenager, to like figure out what job would be the best fit for me.
Yeah.
And it came back and it said, like, you should be a CPA. It was like a certified public accountant. And I was like, that sounds terrible. That sounds so. He's like, but it's a reliable job. And, your parents, like, they always want what's best for you, right?
Of course.
Sure.
And so, like,
Of course.
he just really wanted to make sure that I would have a career that would actually be able to feed a family and at least myself, at least feed myself.
Of course.
And so, so I definitely always appreciated that about my parents. But, it's like, no, I'm not going to be a CPA. I really want to study political science. So that's what I studied at UCLA. And, I got an internship out of my undergrad program here in Sacramento at the UC Center Sacramento program, and which we actually currently have interns from the UC Center Sacramento program
we have
in our
two
office
currently.
right now, which is really cool. We continue to work with them, but that was how I got my start. Is I did a summer internship through that program in Sacramento, interned for a state senator from Riverside County. Yeah. And just never left. I stuck around and worked in public policy for a number of years, eventually ran for my local school board before, running for higher office. So, but just always an interest of mine.
No, absolutely. That's great. And in undergrad, did you do any sort of extracurriculars relating to like political student organizations?
No.
And stuff like that? All right.
I did nothing in undergrad. I mean, I just went to class and did my work. That was it.
Yeah,
and I worked.
That's
I worked. I worked my way through college, so I didn't really have time for extracurriculars.
Yeah.
Right.
My wife and I got married very young. We had kids very young. We actually had our first was down with us at my undergrad program down in UCLA, and we were super poor, so we had I went to class and I went to work. So that was funny. My college experience. It was definitely not it was not the fun college experience I think a lot of kids have, or a lot of young adults have, but I think it really helped kind of prepare me for the real world. So,
No, that's
builds
right.
character.
Yeah, it definitely built a lot of character.
Sure. We do have a question relating to family, so you don't have to get too much.
Yeah.
Sarah, you can take the next one.
Yeah, before we get into that one, someone wrote in and asked, what have you learned in your first year as a legislator?
So, what have I learned in my first year as a legislator? Wow. I think, I think it's been really interesting. I mean, first of all, like, really trying to figure out how best to work with people, find ways you can find common ground.
Yeah.
Not burn bridges with people, because you never know when you're going to need to work with that legislator or that staffer again.
Yeah.
Even if they, upset you over one issue, I think, I think it's always important to try to maintain those relationships, and really just how many different personalities there are. And it's insane. I mean, there's 80 assembly members, and we're all different, right? We all come from different backgrounds, different life experience, different education, different expertise, different districts. I mean, everyone has a different district that has different needs in California. I mean, priorities. The needs of my district in Sacramento County are very different than the needs of a district in San Francisco or Los Angeles or the Central Coast, or even, up in Redding or the rural, North State, right? So, I mean, we live, and this is one of the things I love about California, is we live in such an amazingly diverse state. but it also makes it more challenging to govern as a state because the values and the interests of every community are so vastly different. And so I think I've been worked really hard to get to know, actually build relationships with my colleagues, really get to know, what makes people tick and find ways to navigate all the different personalities. I think overall, everyone comes here to do good things, and we may disagree on the best course of action on those things, but we definitely, want to best serve California.
Of course.
And so, just understanding that, knowing that, people come here to do that, but that there are vastly different ways that we believe is the best way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
On some topics, not every topic, but on some major topics like public safety, right? Would be a good example of that. But I think that approach has really allowed us to be, very productive in the assembly. I mean, you guys are on the front lines of this, but we've moved a lot of legislation forward, and some of it very substantial on homelessness accountability, on education, on a number of different things. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's been interesting.
Yeah, lots of personalities and lots of type A personalities. I feel like this place tends to bring them.
Yeah.
That is very true, actually.
But people bring an understanding that, as you say, we all want to, improve California. So, all right. Next is regarding family. How does your family feel about you being in the assembly?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, obviously,
And you were previously on the school board.
I was on the school board for a while. It's pretty different, I'll be honest. Like being elected locally, there's so much that I loved about that, right? Because you're not necessarily like, you're still kind of anonymous.
Right.
But you also get to work on some big things that affect your community directly. The assembly is definitely a different ballgame from that standpoint, where you're really doing things of statewide concern. I mean, you obviously do things that affect your community directly, but it's just a much larger, debate. I mean, instead of convincing 2 of your colleagues, you have to convince, 40 plus 61 of your colleagues and plus the governor, right? So it's definitely it's a different ballgame. But my family, I will say that has been one of the most challenging things, has been navigating, the balance between, your time in the assembly, obviously serving the people of California, voting on legislation, crafting legislation, serving your constituents in your district, and also still finding time to spend with your kids and your family, your wife. And I think that has been, from that perspective, this job does make it very challenging. That's why I look forward to things like summer recess, because while we will still have a lot going on in the district, it does give us, there's a couple times a year where we're able to really just spend more time with our families, and being intentional about prioritizing those times and actually making them about, spending time with your family is really important. I've seen, it's really tough when you're stuck at the Capitol all the time. And not only at the Capitol, right? We get out of the Capitol and then you have to go to evening events, and you have to go to district town halls, and you have to, there's just a lot of different commitments that you have to do. And so,
the commitments.
My family has handled it amazingly. My wife has been so incredibly supportive. Like, seriously, like I cannot overstate how supportive she's been and how much she has had to really, do to really help me do this job. Our kids are getting older now, which is great. They're all, actually, there's one at every level now. So I've got a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary school student. So they're kind of each level of education, but they still have a lot of things that they're doing. And I think, this last weekend, I had to make a choice. I've always in the wonderful Folsom Hometown Parade every year. And we have a great time. And I wasn't in it this year because my son had some basketball games out of town, and I wanted to go be with him, be with him at that. And so, you kind of got to make those decisions and find a way to balance that stuff. But my family's just been incredible. And yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to have them. So.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and you can still, you had your little one here last week, so you can
Yeah,
still
he
kind of
was on
incorporate them.
oh my
So.
gosh. Yeah, I brought my youngest son, Austin.
Yeah.
He's 10 on the floor for one of the craziest days in the legislature where that should have been our clip of the week actually this week.
I
It's
know,
like,
yeah.
we won't go into it, but there was almost a
Sure.
literal physical fight on the assembly floor. And it's just like, guys, this is not a good example of democracy. My son is sitting
my
right
son
here.
is
By
right
the way,
here.
just to be clear, I was not part of the physical fight. It was
Most
not-
people were like,
it was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
And just like, yeah, that was pretty crazy. So
yeah.
but yeah, did get I every now and then I'll bring one of them with me to work and kind of they get to see the process, and they don't have an appreciation of it right now, but maybe someday they will.
Come around.
I think they will.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Okay, so we are going to get you actually received a few questions pertaining to the smartphone bill that you're working on. So I'm going to try to kind of capture a few of the questions.
Okay.
This one in particular has multiple questions within it.
Okay.
There are some concerns as far as enforcement and how educators and teachers and administrators feel about your smartphone bill, as well as parents. So we know that sometimes parents like to be able to communicate with their children during the day. I know my mom used to text me, give me a call in between classes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So if you could just speak to, that was a little bit broad, these questions kind of cover a few different things, but what this is actually going to look like for the schools.
No, I think it's a great question. I did hear we got a number of questions from educators probably on this topic. Really, just concerned. So essentially, just real quick to set up the bill, it's AB 1361.
3216.
Gosh, see, I don't. Wow, I wasn't even close. Okay,
you got a 3 in there.
AB 3216. I've got too many. Oh, I think I just read 1361 is the one we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
AB 3216 essentially is a bill that I have authored that has received. In fact, last week we passed it out of the Senate Education Committee unanimously, strong bipartisan support. The governor has actually come out and supported it in concept, which is fantastic. But essentially, what it would do is it would require school districts to pass a policy limiting or prohibiting smartphones during the school day. So that's just at the base level. That's what the bill will do. Now, I think it's really important to point out. So I think one of the questions was, have you talked to educators? Have you talked to administrators? We actually had an administrator testify in support of the bill last week in the Senate Education Committee. He is a principal at a local middle school in my district who has implemented this policy, and he was able to speak to all of the amazing benefits that have come to his students and his student body as a result of implementing this policy where students middle school students specifically are not allowed to have their smartphones out during the school day. Now, in Folsom Cordova Unified, where this which is in my district, where this policy has been implemented, they use these yonder bags. So they actually put you keep your phone on your person, but you actually lock it in a yonder bag. If you've ever gone to like a really big comedy show, they make you do this where so you can't record or whatever. But that district does use those bags as a kind of enforcement mechanism. So it reduces the liability issues because the student maintains their phone for the day, but it also, and then you don't have to enforce it as heavily because the phones are locked away. Now, other districts do it differently, where they simply require the phone be off and in your backpack, and they enforce it via, administrators will actually enforce it via, either verbal reminders or, some sort of penalty, maybe confiscation of the phone or something like that.
Sure.
So I think it's important to point out that my policy does not prescribe how districts have to do this.
Right.
It doesn't actually even prescribe what grade level they have to do this.
Right.
I think a lot of schools have banned them at the elementary school level and then allowed them at higher grade levels kind of progressively. That is, nothing in my bill would prohibit that from happening. It simply basically says that districts need to have a conversation in their communities about what policy works best for their community. And so yes, my bill does require action to be taken, but really the vision of the bill is that every district in California is going to have a different conversation about the best way to implement this.
Right.
And so, yes, I have talked to educators. I've talked to a lot of teachers that strongly support this. I've talked to a lot of principals that strongly support this. I do agree that there's challenges here, right? You have to build a culture where students will follow, this restriction. And so, it is not, some school districts have had challenges in enforcement, because, you really have to build that culture of like, hey, this isn't allowed here and you can't lose control of that.
Yeah.
And so every district's going to get a chance to figure that out on their own. But this is not going to be easy overnight, right? On the parent side, but I will say to that point, we have seen a lot of success in the districts in my district that have implemented it. They have figured it out, and they have, one of the things that the principal that testified last week spoke to was, it's been incredible how much parents actually appreciate it now, because their kids are, during the lunch hour, they used to all be on their phones, just staring at their screens, not interacting with one another. Now they're actually talking to one another, actually spending face-to-face time with their fellow students. And it has just been a game changer for their mental health. It's been a game changer for their relationships at school. It has significantly reduced cyberbullying on campus, which is a huge, goal behind this bill. And then if you look at, the rates of mental illness and suicide and depression among youth since the early 2010s, when smartphones started becoming more and more common, they have just skyrocketed since that time. And that is really what this bill is about. It's about giving our students some time, especially during the school day, where they're not on their screens, they're not on their smartphones, they're focused on their academic experience. And the where they've done this across, even globally, they've done this in France and England as well. They've seen improvements in academic performance as well. But to the parent point, I will say that when we passed this policy, because I actually passed this policy locally when I was on the school board prior to coming up here, and now I'm trying to force it on everyone. No, but seriously, I think it is a matter of statewide concern, and I feel that strongly about it because I am a big proponent of local control, which is why I wrote it the way I did. But I think it's critical that districts do have a policy on the books with the goal of limiting smartphone use during the school day. But at the school board level, when I passed this, there were concerns from parents. And they came forward and they said, we want to be able to contact our student during the day. We want to be able to, do all these things. A few thoughts on that, and then we can move on. But essentially, my bill does allow for exemptions for phone use in the cases of emergencies. It allows for exemptions for phone use in the cases of what was the other one?
Say, like, if a doctor has
a doctor's note. Also an IEP.
Right.
If your phone is a part of your IEP program, the restriction would not apply to you.
Or just under supervision of an authorized.
And that was the other
teacher
thing. And then a teacher or administrator could also authorize you to use it during the school day. And so we've been very thoughtful about how we've written this bill. We have a number of exemptions in place, to allow for that to happen if it needed to happen.
Yes.
And then I'll also point out that, you mentioned your mom used to text you at school. My mom didn't, because I didn't have a cell phone.
Not me.
And so, like, this is a very new phenomenon, and I understand, kind of we want to be in contact with our kids. I've got my kids, 2 of my 3 kids have phones at the moment, and I do get wanting to be able to contact them. But the reality is there are other ways to contact your child as well. And, used to be calling the front office. That's still a thing that can happen, right?
Yeah.
And so there are certainly other ways. And again, the fears kind of behind this, when it's been implemented, at least in our district, those really melted away after parents really saw the benefits of this policy and what it did to their kids' mental health. And I think that's the ultimate goal here. But anyway, hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and there's been a lot of positive feedback that I've learned of as the person staffing the bill.
Yeah.
And the conversations that I've had, there's been a lot of positive feedback.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the research is becoming increasingly clear.
Absolutely.
As well. So,
Absolutely.
But
yeah. All right.
What's next?
Moving on, we have, given the recent concerns about property crimes in Folsom and Rancho Cordova, what specific strategies are you proposing to address these issues while balancing the needs of our diverse communities in Assembly District 7?
I think it's a great question. I won't dive too far into this one because I think we've already talked a lot today about Prop 47, a number of things.
Course.
But I've put forward a number of legislative efforts to reform Proposition 47. We had a bill last year that I believe was killed in the Public Safety Committee. When you talk to the small businesses owners in our district, they are hurting so bad from retail theft. Car break-ins on the rise, property crimes obviously on the rise. There is so much work to be done. I think all of this stems from that giant change that was Proposition 47 about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that initiative had so many effects on property crime going up, but also, homelessness going up as well, because it eliminated, or at least reduced, the effectiveness of our drug court system in California, where we used to offer people an alternative between jail time and treatment. We're no longer able to offer jail time, and so nobody takes treatment. And so I think that has led to the increasing homelessness that we've seen. It had so many impacts on our state for the worse. And so I have put forward legislation on fentanyl. I've put forward legislation on retail theft. Those are bills that have not made it through the legislative process. And so while we have been putting things forward, I think that's why it's important that voters get a chance to vote on this in November, because the legislature has not shown a willingness to actually get serious about this issue. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. That's great.
So our next question says, what are you doing about inflation prices? Gas goes up, food goes up, electric and gas rates are out of hand, still with no end in rate hikes happening.
I think this is the question that every single family is asking right now.
Yeah.
Including my own family. Like,
and us.
What are we, and you guys, what are we going to do to fix this problem?
Yeah.
As we record this today, what is it, July 1st, right? Monday, July 1st.
Yeah.
This morning, the gas tax went up again. Every single year on July 1st, the gas tax goes up because of a bill that the legislature passed before my time. I think it was back in 2017 that increased the gas tax. And basically said that every single July 1st, your gas tax is going to go up again. So this morning, your gas tax went up again. I have fought very hard to stop that increase from happening. That legislative effort was killed. We actually proposed an effort a few years ago to suspend the gas tax in California. This was back when we had a budgetary surplus. We proposed that we should use that budgetary surplus to pay for road infrastructure, but give relief to people at the pump. Suspend the gas tax in California, which would have saved Californians hundreds and hundreds of dollars per year. That was rejected in the legislature. There is so much work that we need to do. Utility rates, another great example. Why are our utility rates so high in California? It is because we have the most heavily regulated energy space in the nation.
Yeah.
We have passed so many requirements on that we have to meet all of these different environmental goals. We have to have this amount of solar energy. We have to have solar, on every rooftop in California, even though that increases the cost of a house by $30,000. Okay. We govern in California by mandate. We mandate the clean energy future. I think that is the completely wrong approach in California. I am all for incentivizing the clean energy future. Let's give people incentives for going green. If our goal is to, obviously everyone wants clean air and everyone cares deeply about the environment. I really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But if that is our goal, let's incentivize that future. Yes. Do not mandate it. When you mandate things in Sacramento, it falls the hardest on the consumer. It falls the hardest on Californians who are trying to pay their bills because it increases everyone's bills. Mm-hmm. To this question's point, whoever wrote this question in, the gas tax going up today is going to affect the price of food. It's going to make when the gas prices go up, your food goes up. When you mandate a new energy policy, your electricity rates go up or your gas rates go up. I mean, these are things that, we pass a lot of things in California that I have opposed that sound great on paper, but when you actually think about the impact it will have on the person paying the bill, it's going to be incredibly harmful. And we have so much work to do on that. So completely understand where this question is coming from. I would just say that we are, deeply invested in this. This is at the top of our priority list every day. Is how can we make things more affordable for Californians? And so that's going to continue to be something that we fight for.
Yeah. Right.
And we only have a couple minutes left, I think. So
okay.
Let's see. We'll probably have to move a little quicker.
Okay. When the homelessness camp in Folsom Boulevard in Rosemont was cleared, where did unhoused folks go? Where did they offered shelter, or were they left to simply camp elsewhere?
So I think that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it briefly. That is something we'll need to check with the county officials on. I don't know where all those individuals went, but I think that the heart of this question is, when we're talking about encampments, enforcing camping laws, are we just moving people around, or we're actually getting people help? And I think that is at the heart of the question. And even on this Supreme Court decision we were talking about earlier, that is an important thing to keep in mind, right? It is not necessarily solving the homelessness crisis to just move people from one place to another and then they're going to go camp somewhere else.
Right.
I fully understand that. And I think this Supreme Court decision is just step one in addressing our homelessness crisis. The other part of that equation is we need to make housing more affordable in California. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. But we also need to do a better job of treating the root cause of some of these issues. Those with mental health conditions, those with substance abuse disorders. We need to allow not a single dime in California that gets spent on homelessness can go to fund those programs. That needs to change in California. And so at the heart of this question, I think, is the right one, which is how are we actually getting people the help that they need? In California today, I think we're failing to do that. But there is some legislation going through right now that I think will help change that moving forward. Yeah. So we'll report back on that in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And then this is the last one, or?
Yeah, we can do
one more.
Time for one more.
I think one more from the constituents.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do that one and then.
Okay. So, I work in retail. How do we stop shoplifting?
Okay. Well, so we definitely covered that one a lot, right?
Yeah.
So again, appreciate that question. I think really feel for our retail. I worked retail. Absolutely. That was my first job. Was retail.
I worked retail.
I would not be happy working retail right now. It would be really tough.
Yeah.
And again, I think we've kind of talked a lot about what needs to change there to fix retail theft in California. But I do feel for our workers in the retail space because they're being put in some really tough positions right now. It's really tough. So thanks for the question.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. How can constituents in your district get more involved? How do we make sure our voices are heard in the legislature?
Excuse me. Great question. I really, first of all, thank you for every constituent that wrote in, even if we didn't get to your question. Really, really appreciate all engagement. We get hundreds and hundreds of emails every week on different bills, on positions on bills. Please, I would say just please continue to do that. If you haven't done that before, call our office or email our office. You can go to my website, our state website, and find the contact information. But it is, we desperately want your feedback. And so, we get obviously a lot, we take every email that we get, we give a response, but we also track it. So if you email us and say, I'm opposed to this bill, we will actually put that in my notes when I'm voting on the floor. or I support this bill, my notes when I'm voting on the floor. We take constituent opinions extremely seriously. We are here. I'm not here to represent myself. I'm here to be a voice for the 7th Assembly District. And so anytime we get feedback from constituents, we incorporate that into our notes for voting at the Capitol. So please continue to contact us on legislation. And then also, if there's any way that we can help with district issues, whether it's the DMV, the EDD, whatever it might be, we're here to help. So please contact our office with those things as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Was that it?
Yeah. How can they get more involved? Reach out to us. Yeah.
Just stay in contact with us, and we'll keep trying to inform as well. Yeah. We got to close up. I think we're a little over time right now. Obviously didn't get to all the questions, but thank you to everyone that wrote in. Thank you both for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
If you can also send the podcast feedback if you ever have feedback or ideas for future shows. Point of order, it's pointoforderpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on socials @pointoforderpod. And you can listen on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a fun one.
Having us.
This was super fun.
It was a fun one.
Just a reminder, we're taking a break. So this is this is going to be the last podcast for about a month, but we will be resuming in August with lots to talk about for end of session. So thanks again, guys. Always love having you on.
Thank you. Always fun.
All right. See you later.